Ms. Shrestha is currently studying BSc Development Economics with focus of economies of developing countries, South Asia, banking and finance, and gender economics at SOAS University, this University South. She is the president of Nepali Society and at SOAS, student ambassador at SOAS, and the founder of Youth Initiated Services in Nepal. And she will be talking about role of youth in management of natural disaster in Nepal.
Thank you, Dr. Thank you, Dr. I'll be talking to you today about the role of youth in management of natural disasters in Nepal, and lessons we've learned from the 2015 earthquake. We all know that people from all over the world, communities, individuals, youth, have done a lot in terms of trying to do their best. However, we'd like to focus today more on how we can improve that, how we can manage it better, coordination-wise, and how the response could be made even more effective. So I'll be talking to you about the initial responses, specifically by youth, then the external mobilization, then youth's potentials, lessons learned from the earthquake, phases of disaster management, and then ultimately what the youth can actually do to make things better. So just a brief background, over 50,000 youth volunteered in Nepal, in Kathmandu itself, and if we were unable to promote this in terms of local level youth, we could have increased this as well. Also, they engaged in wide range of activities from cleaning roads, setting up sanitation facilities, temporary shelters, and distributing medical supplies, just to their capabilities. And the youth may not have known exactly what to do, but they did want to contribute. So if they did know what they could do, and they needed to do with better preparedness, better response, then all of this could have definitely been improved. So as you can see, the initial response, these are the stages, and the first responders are usually the locals, and specifically the youth. And therefore, it is very important to reemphasize why youth need to be more prepared for future disasters. And then you can see ultimately different NGOs, organizations, governments, and support from abroad just flows in throughout the time. And in terms of external mobilization, people from all over the world, Nepalese people, have raised materials, have raised funds, provided experts, as well as expressed solidarity in order to support the victims of the earthquake. And this photo is from the candlelight visual that we did in Trafalgar Square as part of Universities of London and Nepalese Society. We tried to mobilize the whole support for this, and we were quite astonished how, just through a small amount of time that we had, we were able to mobilize quite a lot of people, and this shows the potentials of the youth. And the funds that were collected, regarding the funds that were collected, since we weren't there in the position directly to implement them at the time, we passed these on to different organizations such as the Rotary Clubs in Nepal for immediate relief projects, and then we also looked into construction of emergency shelters, and then reconstruction of some schools as well. And now we're looking into building community centers, because community center, this concept is quite well known in the developed world. However, in Nepal, it's not quite well established, and it's not quite well understood. So hence we're trying to do this. And moreover, due to the landscape of Nepal, due to the lack of infrastructure development as well, it's very difficult for immediate relief to be passed through, and therefore community centers are very, very essential in terms of providing immediate relief and mobilizing people, empowering, and being more prepared throughout time. So here's one of the schools that we were doing in the Lalitpur district, just outside 30 minutes drive from Sandabato, and these were other things that we were doing. The first photo just shows sanitary, feminine hygiene, things that we're distributing. This was one of the temples that had fallen down, and we were just trying to, well, not we as in me, but then youth that were already there, and the road track clubs and things like that. So youth's initial potentials that the youth have, it's important to focus on the preparedness for the youth, as they're leading coordinators, and they have the coordinating and leading capacities. And they're also very enthusiastic, physically active, and they're very adaptable, supportive as well, and come up with different innovations and creative ideas. So it's very important that we focus on this. And empowering youth can also enable them to engage their families, their communities, their peers in disaster readiness, and also building kits like pre anything, building kits of supplies that they need to have, basic essentials, a list of basic emergency things that they need to know, first aid trainings, and equipment to remove rubbles, which is something I'll talk about in a bit. And also youth, when they're empowered with the knowledge and they understand what they can do, they're able to handle things more confidently. And they can not only support people that are suffering through mental well-being as well as social, so they can do a lot of things if they're prepared and ready for the situation. Also, it's very, very important to bring this preparedness training and into the education system itself, not just through local activities, but also implementing this through policies in the government as well. And so some of the lessons we learned was that there was lack of aid coordination. There was also lack of accessibility and mobilization. There was loads of goods that were sent from abroad that was stuck in the airport for a couple of days. There was loads of mobilization issues as well. And also lack of monitoring mechanisms. And this is also an area where youth can play an oversight role to ensure that the funds are properly utilized. And it's also important that we see youth are willing to help at every level. And they're not well trained and equipped, especially in terms of developing countries, especially in terms of Nepal. They weren't well prepared, yet they did what they could. So I just want to show this small clip about how there was a situation where you'll see it, and you'll realize how it's a bit saddening to see that you couldn't do much. So you're saying that you couldn't. So due to lack of materials, due to lack of preparedness, youth wanted to help this man, but they were trying very hard. They didn't know what to do. They successfully managed to help him out eventually, but you could see they had no equipment. They were not ready. So this really could have made things better if they were more prepared. So, yeah. Sorry. Sorry. Why is it still playing? It's from here. Sorry, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. So there are three main phases of disaster management. You could add more, and you could make this more in depth, but the main ones are to be prepared. Prevention and mitigation is so important in the first place. And then there's the response, the rescue relief, the immediate response. And then there's the recovery, rehabilitation, and rebuilding, and further improving the development of the society. And so the capacity and there is capacity to develop and empower youth. And we can't expect people from abroad or even Kathmandu to immediately reach these local areas. And it's very important to realize that lack of access can cause so many more problems, and lack of access to immediate relief can cause more deaths and things like that. So that's why it's very important that local youths are also empowered. And in the long run, we have to realize that the short-term help that we get from volunteers, from abroad, from foreign aid, it can't sustain the process, and mediate the progress either. So hence we need local youth mobilization. In terms of youth preparedness, strategies should be ongoing and self-sustaining to be more effective. And first of all, like awareness and information to the public on disasters, on how to prepare better, how to respond during the event, including community self-management, as well as through formal channels like introducing things in the curriculum, training. So that leads to training as well as youth volunteers to respond better in terms of improved skills, knowledge, self-management. Then in terms of preparing response teams to be equipped with tools beforehand, they also have more information about what are the risks, how you can mitigate them, and relief items. So then in terms of advocacy for government regulations and policies to prevent and mitigate these impacts of disaster, and the framework on governance of disaster management needs to be rethought about. And youth can make a difference in changing regulations such as regulations for housing, plannings, and school training and other policies that need to be developed. So youth can really play a big role in advocating through various channels. And then there's supporting and planning and development of community shelters. And this is to be used during the relief phase as a multi-purpose center for any relief materials needed, relief healthcare things to be done. And then on a regular basis, it could be used as a shelter, the school, gymnasium, anything, a multi-purpose event place to promote training, to for any other activities that are required. And then there's, there's the research for innovation, creativity, practical solutions that you can come up with in responding to disaster management. And youth will also take the lead and delegate in terms of coordination, as they know better in terms of what's there in the local areas. They know the people, they know how to interact, they probably have more information about the community rather than people coming from just externally. Moreover, regarding illusion of support, moreover due to communities being very dependent on foreign aid as well as support from the central government, communities have prevented themselves from building their own capacity or utilizing their capacity to the optimum. So this illusion has led to them not even building houses because they thought that they would have the support from the government and so forth. So therefore it is very essential for communities to be empowered, to be trained on how to be self-reliant in managing on their own as well with limited support. So just to conclude, it is a challenging task in order to mobilize youth in terms of where we need to go, but we need to start this somewhere, and the effort has to be ongoing and self-sustaining. And it is essential to prepare and mobilize the locals, human resources for the benefit of the locals in general. This is the only sustainable way that disaster preparedness and long-term development can happen. And moreover, we need to continue the momentum of youth involvement. So we need to, therefore, this can only be done through a local level, once again. And there's no second best solution as such in terms of long-term preparedness. It needs to be done through a local level where we can improve the effectiveness of response. And youth active involvement in preparedness is the only sustainable way forward. So, yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Monika. Bang on the time. Thank you.
Okay.
And who said that in Nepal is a hopeless country? With this enthusiasm of the young, I think we have a bright future.
Thank you so much.
So any questions for Monika, please? You stay.
You don't go now.
I don't go anywhere.
Yes.
I think you mentioned an extremely important point, which is momentum. So I think momentum is an issue for a lot of the things we do. At one point I was also a very enthusiastic youth like yourself, and then you involved in some activity, and then after a while that thing fizzles out, and then the people you train, who've got the skills, they leave and they do other things. So, so then we have to kind of repeat the cycle every time. So we add that same square, every year. So how can we break this cycle? I think that's a very important question.
That's actually a really great question. I think I forgot to mention how actually through education, if it's built in the curriculum and the system, through educating youth and children, they will become the next generation's adults. And hence they're going to be more prepared. So I think it's sort of like that cycle. We do remember vital things. We can't make the education so that it's more like an ad hoc training. It should be more embedded into understanding more of why it's so important to mitigate these things, to be more prepared. It shouldn't be like a temporary solution. It should more be embedded in the education system. That's what I really believe in. However, that's more of a long-term thing. In the short term, I think local communities, local empowerment is more essential. Because like I mentioned, if people come from abroad, train them, and then they leave, then what happens? We're back to square one. So yeah.
But in addition to that, we also need to have mechanisms and systems in place, so that new people coming in can fit into the system.
Right.
And there are senior people who can train them. So we need to have institutions and systems which are more permanent in nature.
We have plenty of time for questions, actually.
My question is adding on to Dr. Mananda's question. Obviously, you listed the respondents, number of respondents. The fifth one was international aid.
Yeah,
Was
the
it?
fourth one was international aid. Yeah, that's fine.
International
Go
support,
back.
fifth or fourth, whatever. Was that in terms of the the priority, or was it just?
No, it's how quick they're able to. We can go back to the slide if that's okay. Yeah. So just in terms of how quick they arrive. So the fourth one,
Yeah.
which they come.
No, sorry.
within-
I was talking about fifth one, support from abroad, not international.
Okay, so the reason I said it takes a long, it's important. All of these are very, very vital to the process of response. However, the thing is, this is the response in terms of how quick, like within 0 to 24 hours, there's the local community that can do quick, relief work. And I think the fifth one is, it just takes more time. Like even if I were to book a flight and go to Nepal immediately, it would take some time. Or if anyone, expert levels abroad, even if it was relief material that we gathered from like the Trafalgar Square candlelight visual, it took a week from the date of the earthquake for it to land into the hands of the people.
My question is actually coming next.
Okay.
So that was one. Because I no disrespect to all the youth who has worked there, because obviously they have put in enormous amount of work into it, enthusiasm, energy, drive, whatever you call it. But what I found was, without that fifth responders, I think the rescue process would have been supported by the youth. I think the relief distribution process would have been struggled a lot, because lots of youth who had those relief materials were in need themselves before they could give away. So what I found myself when I was doing it was lots of support from abroad actually helped these youth. And what happened was, adding on to Dr. Mananda's question, it stopped immediately after the schools and colleges started opening, right? And if you, because I was there after a month when school has already started, and I found it so difficult to find a single youth to go help me. Because obviously most of them were working for abroad companies who were on the field. They were called back to work, and obviously they were behind deadline for a month or so. So they were working overnight to catch up. So I struggled really badly on that. Whether you had a similar kind of experience, I'm not quite certain. But again, adding on to Dr. Mananda's question, you will need to form this sustainable model to keep on sustaining these, because you can't keep on asking money from abroad all the time. So is there any kind of things that you guys have thought of?
In terms of what model to do.
Or how to keep it sustainable, for example, because asking it all the time, same thing, with the same people, might not be as feasible as you think.
Like you said, about an institution, a civil society that is there, that's already got the experience and that has a little bit of time to devote, even whether it's like an hour or two a week, that really works well. That's what I noticed. Like you said, a lot of people were already back in their workforce. Like I was able to go a month after the earthquake because I had exams and everything. So when I went, I did realize that there was, the momentum was still there, but not quite, just because they'd already gone into schools. And hence there is a need for sort of civil society, but then there are organizations like the Rotary clubs and things like that.
They're not typically youth, are they? They are actually
the
working for
clubs
it.
are quite,
Obviously, they are actually mostly kind of working for it, not voluntarily working.
This is a big range, right?
It's a range,
Yeah.
yeah.
Youth means, until 40.
40, yeah. 16 till 40. Yeah, you're all youth.
Actually, I have a slightly different experience than you. Actually, when I went back after 3 months, and there's so many organizations who are still carrying on this relief effort actually. But at the same time, like you said, okay, so they might not be in the ground because they have their own work, but like they are working in a group. And they are, having some particular projects. Say, for example, schools within, they are providing like board and dusters. Say, for example, chalk and dusters. Small things, but still active.
And as I said, it always went back to the fifth responder again. Anyway, if they had support from abroad most of the time, they were able to do more significant things
I
than
think it's
when
all
didn't
very
have support.
interconnected.
Yes,
This was
yes,
more
absolutely.
in terms of the initial response.
Yeah.
I think in the long term, all of it is quite important, but it's
Yeah.
the structure that matters, like you said, the system that is more sustainable. And I will think of a framework and, try to find what could be
Yeah.
a good long-term solution. But I didn't actually think about that, so I'm glad. Thank you for...
Okay, one last question.
I don't know how many of you were in Kathmandu when the earthquake happened. Anybody?
Yeah, me.
You were there. Oh.
The big one you
The bigger.
And I was there too. And I just wanted to give you a little bit brief observation experiences I had. Whatever you're talking about all is pretty good, theoretically. When you are in it, when you are actually as a victim, it's completely different kettle of fish. What happened was, to me, when the earthquake happened, after about 12 hours later, everybody, like you said, they're local and youth, and they help each other. And where are the government? And everybody expect the government to come. And we were also expecting the government to come. But at the same time, as a local and neighbor, you always wanted to help the victims. So we were there to try to help over the night. And then the moment the police came, and they were actually prevented any local to go in. Because local, they don't have any equipment or anything to do. So we left it at that. What they do? They don't do anything, right? So, and the experience that I had that being a doctor and all these things, you try to do something, and there is a prevention from the police and from the army and from the... So, I was so helpless, I mean, all the theoretical that we can say, we can do, all the things, and we also heard after 2 days, there's so many international aid is coming up. But everybody expect at least some food distribution, which is also was not done by the government or by the police. And so much so that we ran out of the water, right? And we had to buy the water, and the water is especially for the army to start with, and then money for the public. These are the experience that, we all have a different experience, and what I would like to know that you are correct in saying, theoretically, yes, you have to have a training on it. But how do you start that? Like Suresh said, yes, you have to have a plan of action. But like Otis said, youth are the first and foremost were there to help. There also they will prevent by the authorities. So I was very, very depressed and terrible at that time. So I just gave up. So now my suggestion, perhaps, going to the SACO and all these things after about a week later, and I thought maybe international aid can be all right, but if we just concentrate on one area as a model, so that from Pasiputau Guthi or from any organization that goes to model, to village, to develop the SAPU or any other that you know, that do that sort of with duty and with your concentration and to give your soul and heart at it, so that we can tell them that we can do it as an organization, rather than dips and drabs and here and there. And I don't think it's not going to. It's not working. To me, my observation is, every year I go, and we are all doing International Day, like you say that, like Ojas said that, we can't just give the money. Now I visited one in Goravati area. There is about French people gave some aid. So I think Tara was there too. They build the bamboo one, for the hut and things like that. But they expect so much from the outsider, but they don't help themselves. So we also have to have a little bit of education awareness for themselves. I think our job is not just a financial, our job is, like you say, the educating awareness and preparing all these things. We have to have just get one area and help on that, and get the model village. That's my suggestion, I think. I may be wrong.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so,
say that.
yeah, if you have any more questions,
Sorry.
please, in a,
All right, okay.
there's a tea break
Is
as
it a
well.
comment?
I just wanted to say a comment.
Okay, yes, this is coming. Okay,
Just
quick
a
comment.
comment to follow that. Actually, I was just suggesting the same thing, what you exactly said in the poster session outside. I think that's a very important point, and that was the point of my question as well. That it's we need to go past this model of helping in drips and drabs. We need to be thinking very seriously about how to create institutions which have a long life and which are there, to educate the people, and which is self-sustaining. And I think we, the educated people living in the UK and abroad, have a responsibility in terms of building such models and coming up with the ideas of how we can put that in practice.
And also, it's not a question, it's just a comment. And there are so many youngsters about here, right? I think you guys are the future for us. You should actually think about it and get the model village, and wherever you want to go in Nepal. It doesn't have to be Kathmandu, it doesn't have to be Goravati, it doesn't have to be Pokhara. Just pick your one village and do that. Pasiputau can do something about it. Show the people that you can do it. That all the money goes there and all the effort goes there, and we can show them that you can do it. Because I met quite a few youngsters over there. They are really dying for somebody to show them how to write a project. And I asked them to write the project about the water. So you can do it, and this is just a suggestion for the youngsters. You can do it. And get the advice from the senior if you want.
Thank you. So, yes.
Very quick.
Okay.
Yeah, strong institutions and good governance link very well together, and hence, even when we were trying to do, we were trying to build sustainable types of houses, we were stopped by government institutions saying that you don't have a planning permit, we haven't even made the planning. So likewise, there are efforts that are being made. There are loads and loads of barriers that I face that I'll be writing in a blog later on. So just, yeah, so that's that. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.